Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's seminar. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes more, just to allow some late attendees to join. Whilst we're waiting for those people to log in, we do have a small opinion poll running down in the bottom left corner. This is just to tell us a bit more about the people that are in the room with us today. So I'll leave that running while we wait a minute or two for everybody else to join. Okay, thank you everybody for voting. Interesting to see majority of people today from the sales and marketing function, so welcome. Okay, now that's done, we're going to begin the seminar. Okay, so everybody, welcome to today's seminar. This is the first in a new webinar series from Able & How. We'll be looking, over the next few webinar sessions, we'll be looking at how to deliver effective change management to business transformation projects. Just a quick guide to using the room. You can join the in-room discussion using the chat room. We are very keen to hear about your own experiences, in terms of projects you're either working on just now or projects you've worked on in the past. So, do share, your questions, feedback, or any of your experiences to date that you think might be of interest to everybody else in the room. Registered users will, of course, receive a copy of the slides and a link to the online recording of the presentation. And finally, a quick note to say, this session is being recorded for online distribution. Okay, everybody, I'm going to introduce myself very quickly. So my name is Alan MacDonald. I'm a manager here at the Able & How practice. With me in the room is man of the hour, Paul Arnold.
Thank you very much, Alan. So today we have picked the topic of change management in organizational transformations. And the reason for picking this particular topic is that obviously transformations in particular is an increasingly popular topic in organizations, as we've seen with the advent of transformation roles, such as transformation director, transformation managers. And as a result, transformations have also become very relevant within the recruitment market. So we're going to today explore the role that change management plays within organizational transformations. So first of all, what is change management? The truth is, with everybody on this webinar and amongst your stakeholders within a particular meeting, everybody will have a definition, and chances are that none of those definitions will exactly match. Some people will still consider change management as the form of change requests within technical projects, so software such as Jira and ITILs. And then there'll be others, especially leaders, who will see change management as simply a title which really is a way of fulfilling part of people's day jobs or an aspect of project management. Now, I guess the truth is that with all of these different definitions, the most important thing to bear in mind, in our view, is that change management is always includes the involvement of people. So change management is about people, and we're going to explore that in a little bit more detail. And the first way of doing that is we've included here what we would call a hurdle question, and at Able & How we particularly like this because of its simplicity. So were you to engage one of your stakeholders and ask the question, as a result of a project or program, will people need to do things differently? If the answer is yes, then there is a change management need. Now, clearly, as a hurdle question, this is deliberately designed to help facilitate a conversation around, okay, we have a change management need, so what is it that we're going to do from a change management point of view? I guess the first departure point to look at this is to look at the role that change management plays in different types of change, and from the simple to the complex. And by that, what we mean is complexity in a number of different aspects. So complexity in terms of time, scale, scope, the way that people are impacted. Recently, I spoke to a senior member in the consulting industry, And I asked him to explain the definition of change management versus transformation. And the description I got was that change management was something particularly small, was a skill required in making very small changes, and transformation was all about significant changes. Now, the truth is that it would be worrying if the industry goes down that route, because in reality, change management is needed in all three of these different instances. So a developmental change is something that can be taking place as part of business as usual. So upgrading IT servers or issuing new phone handsets clearly impacts some people, but the impacts and the scale and the scope potentially don't have the complexity and therefore can be managed within business as usual. A transitional change, such as changing travel policies or upgrading an HR system, clearly can have a lot more complexity to them, whether it be scale, scope, or resistance. And again, change management would be needed. And then finally, a transformational change, by definition, is the most complex type of change, where there are many different factors in play. So a functional reorganization or moving to a shared services model represents complexity across many different aspects.
And so, Paul, for those people in the room, what's the takeaway from this then? I mean, what's the difference between it being a developmental change versus a transformational change? Because we're still saying that you ultimately still need change support across all three of those types.
Well, thank you, Alan. I guess the takeaway is that change management as a practice and as a skill is required in all three different types of these changes. The extent to which it is required clearly changes, but change management is a skill that is needed for all of these in order for any of those changes to be successful. And therefore, importantly, change management skills, as we say here, are invaluable and in demand. So let's just look at transformation in particular. And again, a little bit like with the hurdle question, here is a particularly simple take on it. But essentially, transformation is a significant, complex change taking place within an organization, which represents a radical departure from the current state. And I guess the reason why transformation is particularly important is that it is complex. It represents a dynamic environment and an exciting environment in which to work in. And for change managers or for change practitioners, it represents a huge opportunity to make a big difference to the outcome if change management can be successfully applied.
And I think it's an interesting trend right now, isn't it? That when we look at our clients, when we look at the wider job market, we're seeing a lot more people now that are having both, that are moving from, say, having a sort of project management job title to having one that features change and transformation. Is that something you're also experiencing?
Yeah, very much so. So transformation roles that we've mentioned earlier on are increasingly becoming popular, and within any given organization, there may be multiple transformation roles at any given time. And what we hope to see and hope to promote is that those transformation roles should include not just traditional project or program management disciplines, but should also embrace change management within their remit. So for a transformation to be truly successful, change needs to be part of the equation. So we're going to explore that in a little bit more detail.
Okay, everybody, we'd be really interested in hearing the views of those people in the room. On that very same point. Do you have change? Do you have transformation in your role title? Let us know. Okay, well, that's the voting in. So interestingly enough, half the people in the room report having change in their title, and half the people report having transformation in their title. So it's definitely a trend we're seeing, in this room, certainly. Okay, back to you, Paul.
Thank you, Alan. So having talked specifically about change management and having talked very briefly about what a transformation is, we want to just touch on a little bit more detail on the role of change within transformations. And we have deliberately focused on value and the value that change management brings within a transformation role. So why is change management important or critical in a transformation in order to deliver value? Well, the very first thing is we need to accept that value, unless we're talking about an acquisition and moving things onto a balance sheet, value from a transformation can only be captured in the execution. So in the delivery, in the implementation. So if we take an example of, for instance, a merger, so two companies were to merge, let's say the value that has been identified from that merger represents 100, let's say £100 or £100 million. The next factor to consider is that a technical solution alone will not be enough to capture or to deliver all of that value intended. And by that, what I mean in the example of a merger is, let's say, technical changes or a technical solution can mean lowering the cost of borrowing debt as a result of two organizations merging and therefore having more assets or more liquidity. Or as a result of merger taking place, the two organizations being able to, the procurement functions, being able to command more favorable terms with their suppliers in their contracts. So for us, that represents a technical solution. And as we're demonstrating here, those technical solutions will represent some, but critically not all, the value that has been identified in the merger itself. So in this particular example, we're saying 40%. Now, where is the remaining value? The premise is that the remaining value is locked in the ability of the people who are going to be impacted by the change to actually adopt those changes. So following on the example of a merger, let's say there are new products that need to be marketed as a result of the two organizations merging, or where there were two HR functions, two IT functions, those functions need to be consolidated, representing economies, synergies, headcount reductions. Now, all of that value is entirely dependent on the people who are going to be impacted to adopt that change. So in this example, 60% of the value is locked in the ability of the people who are going to be impacted by that change to get behind that change.
And so, Paul, for the people in the room, does this mean this is finally a means of actually putting a financial value to the benefit of change management support projects?
Yeah, very much so. So our experience is that organizations are very focused on the technical aspects of transformations. And we're hoping that in this way, there is a very compelling case for showing how the value is also locked within people, and being able to quantify that. And that should be sufficient to be able to get people's attention in terms of what investment, in terms of resources and time, is required from a change management point of view in order to mitigate the risk of the value being leaked from those people-dependent aspects of the transformation. So in summary, in a large organizational transformation, a lot of value, in many cases the majority of value, is dependent on people adopting the change. And in very large transformations, that can be in the billions of pounds. So compelling, hopefully, as a case. So I want to just very briefly also talk about, so what exactly is the role, therefore, of change management in transformations, or just more generally? And again, a bit like the hurdle question, a bit like the definition of transformation, at Able and How we use this, and we're particularly keen on it, because of its simplicity. So I like the language that we use here in terms of saying the role of change managers is to bridge the gap between the aspirations of the sponsor or the sponsors, the people responsible for initiating transformation, the people in the technical project teams, so the people responsible for designing and delivering the technical solutions, and then the people in the business impacted by the change. And so change managers, I beg your pardon, change managers operate between all three of those different aspirations. And hopefully this can be used as a way of, again, making the case to show that change management plays a very significant role in large transformations. So let's now look at, if we've identified those three different stakeholder groups, let's look at some of the typical challenge that those three different groups will face in a transformation that are also particularly relevant from a change management point of view. So starting with a sponsor, it is not uncommon to see sponsors becoming quite impatient with transformations and wanting to see quick progress. Now that can be largely explained by the fact that those sponsors or the sponsor executives responsible for making the decision have spent an awfully long time behind closed doors making that decision. And so in many ways for the sponsor, the decision is the turning point, and everything that follows the decision is then a case of simply executing it. Now clearly for the rest of the organization that's not the case, but that goes a long way towards explaining why sponsors get very impatient. To compound that, in many instances, no matter how significant a transformation, that's not going to represent the only priority for those senior executives or for the sponsor, and they will be pulled in many other different directions, which represents a challenge around attention and time. And then finally, no matter how well equipped the sponsor is in terms of empathy and being able to connect with the organization, they will not be able to understand what it means for the front line because if they operate the transformation at a very high level, the answer simply isn't there in terms of what will this mean for me. Moving on to the technical project team, we tend to talk about projects being very focused in terms of scope, and that is translated in terms of projects looking at progress, so being able to move between gateways from a very technical point of view. And in many instances, progress won't necessarily consider people readiness. But if we've just shown how a lot of the value is locked in people readiness, then clearly that represents a gap and therefore a challenge. Similarly, projects will tend to prefer to share information just in time because understandably they want to be able to manage people's expectations. And in many instances, the technical solution will only emerge over the course of the design. However, the rest of the organization cannot afford to operate in a last-minute scenario. So again, bridging that gap between a technical project team's preference not to communicate and the organization's need for information is the role of the change manager. And then finally, technical project teams are notoriously not particularly well equipped when it comes to engaging and communicating with the front line. We have all probably experienced those emails that run to multiple pages and then go into caps and then into bold and then into red. Now that is as a way of trying to get recipients to behave differently isn't the most effective way. And again, there is this dependency on change managers to use more appropriate communications means. And then finally, let's look at the people impacted by the particular change. Understandably, they will be disconnected from the details of the project because they will not have been privy to all of the detailed decisions that led to the sponsor essentially triggering the transformation. And they similarly won't be privy to all of the information the technical project teams have around the design. They will also want to have the change translated into a very personal, what does it mean for me? And as we've just talked about, the solution, the meaningful answer around what it means for me may not be available. And then finally, unfortunately, we often come across this, that for no fault of the transformation, The people impacted in the organisation may already start with extremely low levels of confidence, simply as a product of changes that have come before. So, in summary, the sponsors can be characterised as, at worst, demonstrating what we would describe as runaway leadership. So their eagerness to see the program be pushed into solution mode can make it very hard for the program and for the organization to catch up with them. Similarly, for the technical project team, they are essentially engaged to have tunnel vision around the implementation. But that can mean that programs can be quite selfish by nature and focus simply on the execution of the scope rather than the broader implications on the organization. And then finally, for the people impacted, they can be very reluctant in terms of participation. So it is probably not uncommon to all the people listening for those people impacted to be thinking, I've seen this movie before. This seems familiar to me. I'm going to keep my head down and wait for it to pass me by. So if those are the particular mindsets or the challenges that the three key stakeholder groups face, what can be done, especially from a change management point of view? Well, let's start with a sponsor. To summarize, the biggest fear of a sponsor is that change is seen as risky. So senior executives have reached that position of authority by showing mastery of repeatable processes, and change threatens to disrupt all of that. So what is it that they need? In the most simple terms, the sponsor needs to be given confidence that the organization and the people impacted within the organization will follow their vision. And with that, if they have that, that will allow them, it will give them more confidence and allow them to allow the rest of the organization to catch up. When it comes to technical project teams, their biggest fear is that people will represent a very unpredictable aspect to the progress of the project. And what they need is really confidence again that we will clear a path to delivery of the project by minimizing resistance, by minimizing disruption to the project. And so what about the impacted people? We are all creatures of comfort, and people will fear mostly being pushed out of their comfort zones. And what we can do, what we can give those people that are going to be impacted is evidence that they will be fully engaged and supported throughout the process, which is different to suggesting that they will be given detailed answers as to what it's going to mean to me right from the beginning. What they can get, because that's not possible, what they can get or what they look for is evidence that will be fully engaged and supported. So in summary, change, hopefully we've covered some ground to explain why change is made to be seen so risky and complex, especially when we're talking about transformations where there is that much more complexity to it. We believe that's why change doesn't get done properly, because people don't know where to start. But what we're going to briefly touch on next is that change needs to be made more simple for all three of those different stakeholder groups involved. So we're going to look at three particular areas and give you a sense of how we go about that. So the first one is what we would describe as change program initiation. So we've talked about how leaders try to push programs into solution mode and can get quite impatient. And the danger is that therefore a technical program is initiated, but without a change program or a people program, the danger is that a lot of value won't be captured. So some of the activities that fall under this category are assessing the actual need for change. So if you think about the three different examples of change, how complex is it? Is it transitional, developmental, or transformational? And that will essentially answer what kind of change management support is needed. Build a case for change. So moving beyond simply we have made a decision and helping people catch up with those leaders, designing a change strategy. So how will change be approached, defining business benefits, and then also coming up with a plan, a much more concrete plan. Now, these are all fairly straightforward activities, but they often get overlooked. And then similarly with the benefits, many of these benefits will probably appear within any given transformation program, but without the appropriate change management activities, it becomes harder to understand how those benefits are going to be achieved if you're simply looking at transformation from a technical point of view. So let me give you an example, and I'm going to pick an extreme example just to labour the point a little bit further. Able and How were recently called in by a client to support a transformation program that had actually been launched 18 months earlier. And when we came in, we found that 18 months after the announcement, there had been essentially very little progress made, to the point that it was still unclear who was sponsoring the transformation or what the implications for the business were beyond a very broad, high-level ambition. And it is understandable why that transformation could not essentially get out of neutral, could not even find first gear, if it was unable to address some very basic demands from the business in terms of how that transformation was going to impact the wider organization. And so by running through a change program initiation, we were able to put in place essentially those missing building blocks that were keeping the transformation program in neutral. So let's move to the second area, and what we would call change management delivery, which is simply all of the activities required to support the actual project, the delivery of a project over the course of a transformation, but from a change management people point of view. So those activities might mean understanding the impacts from a people and organizational point of view of the technical changes, agreeing, therefore, the approach to communications, so who needs to be communicated to and engaged, how and when, establishing a network of people within the business who will help to promote the people readiness aspect of the transformation, then testing the readiness. So we talked about how transformation programs can be gauged in terms of readiness purely from a technical point of view, but what about people readiness? And then finally also making sure that the changes are handed over to business as usual process owners, so that the value is captured in the form of embedded change. And again, the benefits appear to be very self-explanatory and can be often talked about within a transformation program. But without these change management activities, it is hard to see how those benefits will actually be captured. So to give you another extreme example, I was talking to somebody within a consultancy the other day who was just coming off a transformation program, in this case, rolling out a financial ERP program. And the changes required two countries, two markets, moving to a shared services model. And 4 weeks after go live of that financial system going live, one of the two countries, so 50% of the markets, was still not using the system 4 weeks after go live. That meant that invoices were not being inputted, suppliers weren't being paid, and that was resulting in even legal action on the behalf of suppliers being sought. So huge example of value not being captured. And a great example of the technical solution being ready. So the system was ready, but the people in that market weren't. And so from a change management point of view, the value could not be captured. So, and then third and final example of change capability development. So this is about essentially giving people who work within transformations, so the sponsors and technical project teams, and even people who are going to be impacted within the business, the confidence to work or to handle change or to work through change. So some of those activities might include training or coaching. It might include assessing the maturity of an organization around change, developing a framework, or even creating a change function or change team, and then creating a change management office. Now, clearly those are activities that increase in complexity or sophistication. And the benefits are essentially the ability for those organizations to become better at the execution of change. And I'm going to give you one final example. We have a proprietary tool called the Change Index, which is essentially a diagnostic tool helping assess the likelihood or how well received any given change or transformation will be received by the organization. And we ran this for a client across 2 different markets. And the senior vice president in one market, when he received the results, had the confidence to be able to interpret the findings and the data, and not just interpret the good results, but also to be able to understand from the poor results what that indicated, and therefore the action that needed to be taken. However, the other example, his peer, another senior vice president who was sponsoring a change in another market, was, shall we say, less confident when it came to change management. And in that particular case, that resulted in the good results being seized upon as evidence of progress. But then any of the bad results or the less favorable results were either dismissed or were essentially buried. But the damage that created was that action was not taken from a change management point of view where it should have been. And that resulted directly in the leakage of value in the overall transformation because mitigating actions weren't taken.
And Paul, I think again, for those in the room, I think it's interesting that this, again, of all the 3 areas, it's probably this one that's actually generating the most amount of interest among clients at the moment, because whereas historically clients would have gone out and sought change management support on a project by project basis, now they're starting to understand the long-term value of having really good, really strong change capability as a core competency within their business. So it's one that they're now recognizing they need to build up within the business as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. So we find that a lot of our clients are getting more sophisticated in their understanding of not only what change is, but the value that change brings, or the ability that change brings in capturing and securing more value from their transformations. And once that happens, then activity can focus towards not just how do we support any given project, but also how do we raise our organizational capability. So that is a trend that we hope will very much continue. So finally, having talked about the importance of change and transformations and looked at some of the challenges and some of the actions, I wanted to spend a very brief amount of time telling you a little bit about Able and How, and not so much to be able to explain to you who we are and what we do, but as a way of, I guess, evidencing how we as a change consultancy have learned to make the case for change management, because whilst there is a trend for change management more and more and for transformations to be taking place, there still is the need for making a case for change management. Now, what you see here is essentially our elevator pitch, and we have learned that, I mean, this is the way that we approach it at Able and How, but we've learned that it is important to make the case for change management before even the case for change itself is made. So without change management, value will be in all likelihood lost. So how do you make the case for change management? And then similarly, these are again our 3 services, but what we have found is that in order to make the case for change management, it is important to be able to translate or to identify very specific activities and show evidence of how those activities will deliver value through the execution of a transformation. And that's because most people don't see a change or a transformation. What they see is a reorganization or a rebrand or a cost-cutting initiative. And so it is important to be able to show how change management activities facilitate the execution of their initiatives and actually augment or improve the ability to capture value. So being able to sell change per se isn't enough. Activities and showing how those activities deliver value is really critical. Now, gladly for Able and How, our clients, all of our clients, have understood the importance of change management in successfully capturing value from execution. And we're very proud of the fact that we've worked with our clients around transformations and collaborating with them on the role and importance of change. And that might not necessarily be the case with all organizations yet. So in conclusion, I think if there are two things to take away, I guess the first one is a program is a change if it requires people to do things differently. So remember the hurdle question right at the beginning. And then secondly, transformations are defined by complexity. And as a result, much of the value through that complexity is likely to be locked in people's adoption of change. And if that is the case, then the case for change management becomes clear and compelling. I think I'm now going to hand over back to Alan.
Okay, Paul, thank you very much. That was a very interesting session. I hope that was of interest to everybody in the room today as well. Everybody in the room, we've got one final opinion poll left. As I said at the beginning, this is the first in what's going to be a series of webinars. So we're really interested in hearing what topics you'd like to hear more about in the future. So do just let us know. I'll keep this open for just a few seconds, and if everybody can vote. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for voting. So that brings us to the end of today's session. As an immediate follow-up, we will make the recording of the session available online for yourselves, and do, of course, please feel free to share that with colleagues or anybody else that you think might be interested. We will also make the slides available as well. But as final follow-up, if you do want more information, please email. You can email us at info@ableandhow.com. Do, of course, please visit our brand new website at ableandhow.com, and do follow us on Twitter and find us on LinkedIn as well. So thank you very much for joining, and we look forward to speaking to you again. Okay, bye.
Thank you.